They busted down his front door like he was a criminal. They shouted for him to get on the ground, guns drawn, faces cold and ready to shoot. But the man they were arresting wasn't a suspect. He wasn't a thief. He wasn't even a stranger to that house. That man was Detective Marcus Reed, and that was his house. He kept trying to tell them, but no one listened, not until the moment his police badge fell out of his pocket, and everything stopped. That's when they realized they'd just handcuffed one of their own. Before we get into this story, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and turn on your notifications, because on this channel, we tell the stories they tried to silence. True stories of pride, pain, and redemption, stories that hit close to home. Now let's get into it. It was supposed to be a peaceful Saturday morning. Marcus Reed had just come off a long week of night shifts. He was one of the few black detectives in the suburban police department, a man who'd fought hard to earn respect in a place where he was often the only face of color in the room. He'd finally gotten a weekend off. No badge. No gun. No stress. Just rest. He made himself a cup of coffee, stood by the kitchen window, and watched the sun peek through the blinds. His mother's old Bible sat on the counter next to his mug, open to the verse she always loved, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." He smiled faintly. He needed that reminder more often than he admitted. Then came the knock. Hard. Sharp. Angry. Marcus frowned, setting his coffee down. He wasn't expecting anyone. He walked to the front door, still in his sweatpants and hoodie. "Who is it?" he called out. No answer. Just another loud bang. Marcus's instincts kicked in immediately. That wasn't a neighborly knock. That was police. He peered through the peephole, and what he saw froze him. Outside, 3 white officers stood on his porch, guns drawn, flashlights cutting through the daylight. His heart dropped. Before he could even open the door, they kicked it in. "Police! Hands up! Get on the ground!" Marcus stumbled back, confused and terrified. "What the hell, this is my house," he shouted. They didn't care. One officer, tall, muscular, jaw tight with adrenaline, rushed forward and tackled him. Marcus hit the floor, face pressed against the hardwood. He felt a knee dig into his back, heavy and merciless. "Sir, wait, please. I'm Detective Reed. You've got the wrong." "Shut up. Where's your ID? Don't move." He could feel the cold metal of the handcuffs snap tight around his wrists. Pain shot through his shoulders. Marcus tried to stay calm. Years of training told him not to resist. But he was in his own living room, on the floor he paid for, and still, they treated him like a threat. He could see his reflection in the broken glass of a picture frame nearby. A photo of him and his late father, also a police officer, lay shattered on the ground. The irony burned deep. The lead officer barked orders, "Search the place. We got a report of a break-in." Another officer replied, "Yeah, neighbor said a black male forced his way in. Matches the description." Marcus froze. Of course. The description. That phrase had followed him his entire life. He'd been pulled over on his way home from work. Followed in department stores. Side-eyed in his own neighborhood. But this was new. Being arrested inside his own house. "Officer," Marcus gasped, his voice muffled against the floor, "this is my home. My name is Detective Marcus Reed. I work out of Precinct 17. The officer holding him down scoffed. "Yeah, sure you do. Everyone's a detective when they're caught." They dragged him up to his knees, still cuffed. Marcus felt anger building behind his calm tone. "Check my wallet. It's in my pocket." But they ignored him. Instead, one of them began rifling through his drawers, overturning furniture, muttering, "Doesn't look like a cop's house to me." Marcus bit down the rage in his chest. He knew where that path led. He'd seen too many black men lose their lives for trying to explain. Outside, Mrs. Dalton, his elderly white neighbor, stood on her porch, watching nervously. She'd made the 911 call after seeing Marcus enter the house earlier that morning. She didn't recognize him without his uniform. And to her, a black man in sweatpants walking into that nice brick house just didn't look right. When the squad cars pulled up, she actually felt relieved. But as the scene unfolded, even she started to realize something wasn't right. Marcus's voice, calm yet desperate, carried through the open door. She heard him shouting, "This is MY house. Please, check the name on the mailbox." Mrs. Dalton's stomach twisted. She suddenly remembered, she'd seen that same man before, last summer, when the department came by for Community Day. He was the one who'd given her grandson a police sticker badge. "Oh my God," she whispered, hand to her mouth. "What have I done?" Inside, Marcus was trying one last time to get them to listen. "Officer, please," he said through gritted teeth, "check my jacket pocket. There's a badge." "Stop talking," one of them yelled. "We'll handle this." They yanked him to his feet and pushed him against the wall. The rough motion sent something sliding out of his hoodie pocket, a small leather wallet that hit the floor with a soft thud. It flipped open when it landed. And there it was, Detective Marcus Reed's badge. The room went dead silent. All three officers froze. The lead one slowly picked it up, staring at it like it was some kind of ghost. Then he looked at Marcus, and his face went pale. "Wait, you're..." Marcus met his eyes coldly. "Yeah. I am." For a few long seconds, no one spoke. The sound of Marcus's heavy breathing filled the room. He could feel the blood pounding in his wrists where the cuffs dug in. Finally, the officer cleared his throat, stumbling over his words. Sir, we didn't realize, Marcus glared. "You didn't realize because you didn't look. You didn't listen. You saw a black man in a nice house, and that was enough." No one answered. He turned his head toward the photo on the floor, the one of him and his father in uniform. His throat tightened. "Take these cuffs off me," he said quietly. The officer hurried to unlock them, hands shaking. Marcus rubbed his wrists, red and sore. He didn't say another word. He just walked to the couch and sat down, breathing hard, staring at nothing. Minutes later, the sergeant arrived, a middle-aged white man who'd worked with Marcus before. He rushed in, confused. "What the hell happened here?" Marcus didn't even look up. "You tell me." The younger officers tried to explain, voices stumbling over excuses. Dispatch got a report of a possible break-in. We arrived and, found the suspect inside." "Suspect?" Marcus cut in sharply. "I live here." The sergeant's face dropped. He looked from Marcus to the wrecked living room, to the broken door, to the destroyed picture frame. He turned back to his men, fury in his eyes. "Do you have any idea who this man is?" he demanded. "That's Detective Reed. He's been on this force for almost a decade." The officers' faces turned red with shame. But the damage was done. When they finally left, Marcus was alone again. His house was quiet, but it didn't feel like home anymore. The scent of splintered wood and sweat lingered in the air. He sat there for a long time, hands shaking, staring at his badge on the coffee table. That little piece of metal had once meant everything to him. It had been his proof, his protection. Now it just looked like a lie. Because in that moment, Marcus realized something painful. Even with the badge, even with the title, he still wasn't safe. Later that evening, his phone rang. It was his mother. "Baby, how was your day off?" she asked gently. Marcus hesitated. He didn't want to worry her. Didn't want to tell her that her son, Detective Reed, had been cuffed in his own living room by the same department he served. So he just said softly, "It was a long day, Mama." She heard it in his voice anyway. "Marcus," she said, "you remember what I always told you?" He swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." "No weapon formed against you shall prosper," she whispered. And for the first time that day, he let himself cry. Marcus didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashing lights. He heard boots stomping through his hallway. He felt the weight of those cuffs cutting into his wrists. By sunrise, he was still sitting on the couch, staring at his broken door. He hadn't even cleaned up the glass. Didn't have the energy. His uniform hung neatly in the closet, but for the first time, he didn't want to put it on. The badge that once made him proud now just felt heavy. He took a deep breath, muttering under his breath, "Just another day, Marcus. Just another day." But deep down, he knew it wasn't. At around 8 a.m., there was another knock at the door. This time, softer. Careful. It was Sergeant Miller, the same man who had shown up after the raid. He stood outside with his hands in his pockets, guilt written all over his face. "Marcus," he said quietly, "mind if I come in?" Marcus didn't answer at first. Then he stepped aside. Miller looked around the wrecked living room and shook his head. "Damn, they really messed up." "Yeah," Marcus said flatly, "they did." For a few seconds, neither man spoke. Just the sound of creaking floorboards and distant birds outside. Finally, Miller said, "I talked to the captain this morning. There's gonna be an investigation." Marcus scoffed. "An investigation? You mean another round of paperwork until everyone forgets what happened?" "Marcus, I get it, man." "No," Marcus interrupted, his tone sharp. "You don't get it. You don't know what it's like to have a gun pointed at you in your own home. To have men you've trained with treat you like a criminal because you don't look like them." Miller sighed. He didn't argue, because he couldn't. He knew Marcus was right. "I'll make sure they're held accountable," Miller said finally. Marcus looked at him. He wanted to believe that. But belief was hard to come by lately. Monday morning. Marcus showed up at the precinct, dressed in plain clothes. The moment he walked in, the chatter in the room died. Officers glanced at him, then looked away. Some whispered. Others avoided eye contact altogether. He walked straight to the captain's office. Captain Harold Benton, a broad, gray-haired man with decades on the force, gestured for him to sit. "Marcus," Benton began carefully, "I heard about the incident." Marcus folded his arms. "Incident? Is that what we're calling it?" Benton sighed. "Look, son, mistakes happen." "Mistakes?" Marcus cut in, his voice rising. "They handcuffed me in my own house, Captain. Guns drawn, shouting at me like I was trash." Benton leaned forward. "I understand, and it's being handled. But you need to stay calm about this." "Calm?" Marcus said quietly, his voice trembling with contained anger. "I've been calm my entire life, sir. Calm when I got pulled over in my own car. Calm when other officers joked about me being the diversity hire. Calm when they treated me like I didn't belong." He paused, eyes burning. "But I won't be calm about this." The captain stared at him for a long time, then nodded slowly. "I'll file a full internal review. In the meantime, maybe take a few days off." Marcus stood up. "I'm not the one who needs time off." And he walked out. By the next day, word had spread all over the department. Some officers sent Marcus short texts, "Sorry, man. Hang in there. Others stayed silent. But a few didn't hide their resentment. At the locker room, he overheard whispers. Man, he's making a big deal out of it. Should have just cooperated like anyone else. He's only mad 'cause he's one of us. Marcus didn't even bother responding. He'd learned long ago that silence was sometimes the loudest answer. Still, it hurt. These were men he'd backed up in gunfights, people he'd risked his life for. And now, he could feel them turning on him. When he opened his locker, someone had scribbled 2 words on the inside of the door. Watch yourself. He stared at it for a long moment. Then shut the locker quietly and walked away. 2 days later, the story hit the local news. Someone, probably a neighbor, had recorded part of the arrest from across the street. The video showed Marcus being handcuffed, face down on the ground, shouting that he was a detective. It went viral overnight. Black officer handcuffed in his own home, the headlines read. TV anchors debated whether it was racial profiling or a miscommunication. Some defended the officers. Others called it proof of systemic bias. Marcus's phone exploded with calls. Friends. Old colleagues. Even journalists. But he didn't want fame. He didn't want sympathy. He just wanted his dignity back. His mother called again that night. Her voice was calm but sad. Baby, you can't hide from it, she said. Maybe this happened so the truth could finally come out. Marcus didn't answer. He wasn't sure if he believed that yet. A few days later, the 3 officers who arrested him were called into a formal meeting with him and the captain. They stood across the table, uniforms pressed, eyes down. The lead officer, Officer Crane, cleared his throat nervously. Detective Reed, he began, we wanted to apologize for what happened. Marcus sat still, staring at him. Crane continued, it was a miscommunication. We got a call about a burglary, and, you matched the... Marcus slammed his hand on the table. Say it, he said coldly. Match the what? Crane hesitated. Then quietly muttered, the description. Marcus leaned forward. Which was what? Crane looked away. A black male. Mid-30s. Athletic build. Marcus nodded slowly. So, basically, anyone who looks like me. Silence filled the room. He let that sit there for a moment, then said softly, Gentlemen, you didn't just humiliate me. You humiliated this badge. The same badge you claimed to protect. He stood up. You don't get to call that a miscommunication. You call that what it is. No one answered. Weeks passed. An internal investigation was launched. Marcus had to recount the story multiple times, to lawyers, to review boards, to reporters. Each time he told it, it hurt a little more. Because every retelling reminded him that it could have been worse. If he'd moved wrong. If he'd reached for his ID too fast, he might not even be alive to tell it. Internal Affairs concluded that the officers had acted within procedure based on the information available at the time. That was the official verdict. No suspensions. No firings. Just sensitivity training. Marcus stared at the report in disbelief. So that was it. His trust, broken. His home, violated. His faith in the system, shattered. And all they got was a training seminar. By now, social media had made Marcus a reluctant symbol. Black officers from other states reached out to him privately, saying things like, Brother, I've been there. Thank you for speaking out. You're not alone. But within his own department, the silence was deafening. Some looked at him like a hero. Others like a traitor. He overheard a few saying, he's just playing the race card to get attention. That one stung most. Because Marcus never wanted attention. He just wanted fairness. He'd spent years proving himself, working twice as hard for half the credit. And yet, one frightened neighbor and 3 careless cops had undone it all in 10 minutes. One night, Marcus sat in his car outside the station, hands gripping the steering wheel. He couldn't make himself go inside. He thought about quitting. Turning in his badge. Walking away from all of it. But then he remembered his father's words. "Son, you don't walk away from the fire. You walk through it. That's how you change it." Marcus took a long, steady breath. If he walked away, they'd win. If he stayed silent, nothing would change. So he made a decision right there in that parking lot. He was going to fight back, not with anger, but with truth. A week later, Marcus agreed to a sit-down interview with a local black journalist named Alyssa Moore. She was young, sharp, and fearless. They met in his living room, the same one where everything had happened. As the camera rolled, Alyssa asked softly, "Detective Reed, why did you decide to speak out?" Marcus looked down for a moment, then said, "Because silence is what keeps this going." He paused, then continued. "I wore that badge for almost 10 years. I believed in what it stood for. But that night I learned something. The uniform doesn't always protect you when your skin is black." He swallowed hard. "And that's not just my story, it's the story of every black man who's ever been told he doesn't belong somewhere he already owns." Alyssa nodded, visibly moved. "Do you forgive them?" she asked. Marcus thought for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "I don't know if forgiveness is the word. But I'm not doing this to destroy anyone. I'm doing it so the next black officer, the next black man, doesn't have to go through this." The interview aired 2 days later. And it changed everything. Community leaders rallied behind Marcus. Civil rights organizations reached out. And suddenly, the department was under national scrutiny. The mayor ordered a full external review of the precinct's practices. For the first time, people were paying attention. Marcus received hundreds of letters, some from strangers, some from young recruits. One note, from a teenage boy in Atlanta, read, "I wanted to be a cop one day, but I was scared they'd never accept someone like me. After hearing your story, I still want to try." Marcus read that one twice. Then he smiled for the first time in weeks. Late that night, Marcus sat on his porch. The air was cool, the street quiet. He looked at the repaired front door, the same one that once lay splintered on the floor. He touched the handle gently, then looked up at the stars. Sometimes healing doesn't come from justice. Sometimes it comes from standing up, even when your knees still shake. He whispered softly to himself, "No weapon formed against me." Then smiled faintly. "Shall prosper." The night breeze carried his words away into the darkness. By the time Marcus walked back into the precinct, everything felt different. Cameras had been outside all morning. Reporters waiting by the gates. News vans parked along the street. The department, his department, was under national fire. Headlines flashed everywhere, "Black detective wrongfully detained in his own home." Inside, officers moved stiffly. No laughter, no small talk. The air was tight with tension. Some gave Marcus nods of silent support. Others looked away, afraid to be seen near him. He could feel it in the air, respect from a few, resentment from the rest. Captain Benton called Marcus into his office again. The blinds were drawn, and a stack of papers sat on the desk. "Marcus," he said, voice heavy, "this thing's gotten big. Real big. The mayor's on the phone, the press won't stop calling, and half the city's watching us right now." Marcus sat quietly. "So what do you want me to do? Hide?" "Not hide," Benton said. "Just step back. Lay low. Let things cool off. Marcus gave a slow, painful smile. I've been laying low my whole life, Captain. I'm done with that. Benton rubbed his temples. You're a good cop, son. But you're walking into a storm you can't control. Marcus looked him in the eye. With respect, sir, the storm's already here. I just refuse to drown quietly. The captain sighed. He didn't argue. He just said softly, then be careful, Marcus. Not everyone in this building wants to see you win. Within a week, Marcus started noticing it. His schedule changed without warning. Cases he'd led were reassigned. Meetings he was supposed to attend suddenly didn't need him. When he spoke up, the answer was always the same, orders from upstairs. He knew what it meant. They wanted to silence him without firing him. But the streets had other plans. Outside the station, protesters gathered with signs, "Justice for Detective Reed. Protect the protectors. Being black is not probable cause." Every chant echoed through the glass walls of the precinct. Inside, Marcus stood by the window and watched quietly. He didn't feel like a hero. He just felt tired. But seeing those faces, young, old, black, white, standing together, it gave him strength. That same afternoon, Officer Crane, the man who had pinned him down during the raid, cornered him in the hallway. "Reed," he muttered under his breath, "you're really gonna do this? Drag the whole department through the mud?" Marcus didn't flinch. "I'm not dragging anyone. The truth's just finally coming to light." Crane's jaw tightened. "You think this is gonna end well for you? You think they'll keep you around after this circus?" Marcus met his stare calmly. "If standing up for myself costs me my job, then maybe it was never worth having." Crane leaned in closer. "You better watch yourself, detective." Marcus smiled faintly. "I've been watching myself my whole life." A few nights later, Marcus was invited to speak at a community forum downtown. He almost didn't go, he hated the spotlight. But something in him said it mattered. When he arrived, the small hall was full. Families. Students. Retired officers. Pastors. Mothers with sons who'd faced the same fear. He walked to the podium slowly, took a deep breath, and began. "I didn't come here as a hero," he said. "I came here as a man who was reminded that sometimes, no matter how hard you work, the world still sees your skin before your soul." He paused, scanning the faces. "I wore that badge believing it meant I'd earned my place. But what I learned that night is that dignity isn't something the system gives you, it's something you carry inside, no matter what they try to take." The room was silent. Then a woman in the front row stood and started clapping. Then another. And another. Soon, the whole room was on its feet. Marcus looked down, his throat tight. For the first time since that night, he felt seen. The next morning, a memo hit his inbox. He'd been placed on administrative review. Official reason: conduct unbecoming during an ongoing investigation. Unofficial reason: he spoke out. Marcus stared at the paper in disbelief. They were trying to shut him down. He went to the captain's office. Benton looked torn. "Marcus, this came from the top. My hands are tied." Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, sir. You always have a choice." He placed his badge on the table. "I'm not quitting," he said, "but I won't wear this while you pretend nothing's wrong." Then he walked out. That night, Marcus sat in his car outside the city's memorial for fallen officers. Rain tapped gently on the windshield. He stared at the names etched into the stone. Among them was his father, Officer James Reed. He whispered softly, "Dad, what would you do?" For a moment, He swore he could almost hear his father's voice in his head. "You can't fix what you won't face, son. Speak your truth. Even if it shakes the room." Marcus closed his eyes, tears mixing with rain. Then he whispered, "I hear you, Dad." A few weeks later, the city held a public hearing on racial profiling in law enforcement. Marcus was invited to testify. The chamber was full, press, community members, and uniformed officers. As he walked up to the microphone, flashes went off. He took a breath and began, voice steady. "My name is Detective Marcus Reed. On the morning of March 14th, 3 of my fellow officers broke into my home and handcuffed me at gunpoint. Not because I committed a crime, but because I looked like one." He let the silence hang. They didn't ask questions. They didn't verify. They just saw a black man in a nice house and assumed the worst. He leaned closer to the mic. "This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. Because if this can happen to me, a cop, then what happens to the man who has no badge at all?" Gasps rippled through the room. Even the mayor sat still, jaw tight. When Marcus stepped down, the applause was thunderous. Outside, reporters swarmed him. He didn't say much, just 4 words. "I want real change." The following week, things got uglier. Someone slashed his car tires in the station lot. His locker was vandalized again, this time with a note, "You're not one of us." But Marcus didn't back down. He'd faced worse. And he knew the difference now between fear and freedom. Alyssa Moore, the journalist who'd first interviewed him, reached out again. "This story isn't over," she said. "People are listening, Marcus. Keep going." So he did. He started attending community meetings, youth outreach programs, police reform panels. He spoke honestly, never bitter, just real. He talked about accountability, compassion, and how bias hides behind procedure. And slowly, people started to see him differently. Not as a victim, but as a bridge. One morning, Marcus got a call from an unlikely voice, Officer Crane. Crane's tone was different this time. Quiet. Shaken. "Reed? I watched your hearing," he said. "I've been thinking a lot about that day. I can't stop seeing your face on that floor." Marcus said nothing. Crane continued, "I was wrong. We were wrong. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to help however I can." Marcus paused, then said slowly, "Start by telling the truth. Not just about me, about what happens in those moments of bias you all pretend don't exist." Crane exhaled. "I will." For the first time, Marcus believed him. 2 weeks later, the department announced new reforms: mandatory body cam use in all civilian contacts, community bias awareness workshops, a new diversity task force, led by Detective Marcus Reed. The news spread fast. Some praised it. Some rolled their eyes. But change had finally started moving. At the press conference, Marcus stood quietly beside the captain. Reporters fired questions, but he kept his answer simple. "I don't need praise," he said. "I just need progress." That evening, Marcus drove home through the sunset. He passed the spot where the raid had happened months ago. His door was new, his home peaceful again. When he stepped inside, he looked around slowly, the repaired frame of his father's photo back on the wall, the Bible still open on the counter. He poured himself a cup of coffee, stood by the window, and watched the light spill across his yard. He whispered softly, "Still here." Then smiled, not out of pride, but out of peace. Because sometimes survival itself is the loudest victory. 6 months had passed since that morning. The story that once burned through every headline had started to fade. The world had moved on. But for Marcus Reed, the memory never left. Every time he walked into his living room, he still saw the spot on the floor where they'd pinned him down. Every creak in the hallway reminded him of that day. But something else had changed too. He no longer lived in silence. He spoke at schools. He led workshops for new recruits. He helped build programs for young men who thought the system was always against them. And still, every night before bed, he whispered the same words his mother taught him, "No weapon formed against me shall prosper." He had found peace, but peace didn't mean forgetting. On a bright Monday morning, Marcus put on his uniform again for the first time in months. His heart thumped hard in his chest as he adjusted the badge on his chest, the same one that had once saved his life, and nearly cost it. When he stepped into the station, eyes followed him again. But this time, they weren't whispering. They were watching with something closer to respect. Captain Benton greeted him at the door. "Detective Reed," he said with a faint smile, "good to have you back." Marcus nodded. "Good to be back, sir." The captain leaned in. "Things are changing, Marcus. You started something real here." Marcus smiled softly. "Then let's make sure it doesn't end with me." That week, Marcus was assigned to train a new recruit, a young white officer named Eli Turner. Eli was eager but nervous. He'd seen the news, heard the story. And he wasn't sure how to act around Marcus. On their first day out, Marcus broke the silence. "Relax," he said with a grin. "You're not walking on eggshells. Just walk straight." Eli laughed awkwardly. "Yes, sir. I respect what you did. I don't know if I could have handled it like that." Marcus nodded slowly. "You could have. You just haven't had to." Eli glanced at him. "Can I ask you something? How do you not hate the badge after what happened?" Marcus looked out the window of the patrol car, thinking. "Because the badge didn't do it, Eli. People did. And people can change." Eli nodded, his face thoughtful. That was the first of many lessons Marcus would teach him, not about policing, but about humanity. One evening, just as Marcus was finishing his shift, he got a call on his radio. "Detective Reed, possible domestic disturbance, 45th and Maple. You're closest." He sighed, grabbed his keys, and drove out with Eli beside him. When they arrived, a crowd had gathered outside a small apartment building. A man was shouting from the doorway, furious and erratic. His girlfriend stood crying on the sidewalk. As Marcus approached, the man turned and froze. It was Officer Crane. The same man who had once handcuffed Marcus in his own house. He was out of uniform now, off duty, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, but his anger was boiling over. Marcus blinked in surprise. "Crane?" Crane's eyes were wild. "Don't come near me, Reed. You don't get to judge me." Marcus raised a calm hand. "I'm not here to judge you, man. I'm here to help." Crane's voice cracked. "My life's falling apart. The department won't stop looking at me like I'm a monster. My wife left. My kid won't talk to me." Marcus took a slow step closer. "Crane, this doesn't have to end badly. Just take a breath." The man's shoulders shook. "I was wrong, Reed. I know I was wrong. I see your face every time I close my eyes." Marcus nodded. "I know. And I forgave you a long time ago." Crane looked up, tears in his eyes. "You did?" Marcus nodded again. "Because hate's too heavy to carry forever." Crane's voice broke. "I don't deserve that." "Maybe not," Marcus said softly. "But neither did I deserve what happened that day. And still, we both survived it. That means something." Crane's anger melted into quiet sobbing. Eli stepped forward, helping him sit down on the curb. The crowd began to disperse. For the first time, Marcus saw not the man who hurt him, but another man who was just broken. Later that night, Marcus sat in his car, still processing what had happened. Eli broke the silence. "That was powerful, sir. You forgave him right there." "I don't think I could have." Marcus smiled faintly. "I didn't do it for him, Eli. I did it for me." Eli nodded. "I think I understand now." Marcus glanced over. "Good. Because forgiveness isn't weakness. It's freedom. You can't lead people you secretly hate." They drove off into the quiet night, both men deep in thought. 2 months later, the city held a recognition ceremony for outstanding officers. Marcus didn't plan to go, but the captain insisted. He stood in the back as names were called, clapping politely. Then he heard his own. Detective Marcus Reed, for outstanding courage, leadership, and integrity. The applause was loud. Marcus froze for a moment, then slowly made his way to the stage. As the mayor handed him the plaque, he said quietly, "You didn't just stand up for yourself, detective. You stood up for all of us." Marcus nodded humbly. "Thank you, sir." He didn't make a speech. He just held the plaque, smiled at the crowd, and walked off stage. But when he looked up, he noticed someone standing in the back, Officer Crane, holding his son's hand. Crane gave a small nod of respect. Marcus returned it. No words needed. Forgiveness was enough. Weeks later, Marcus was invited to the police academy to speak to a new class of cadets. He stood before them, calm and steady, in a crisp suit. Behind him, the projection screen showed a photo, not of his award, but of his broken door from that night. He began simply. "This is what happens when fear replaces judgment. When bias replaces procedure. When humanity gets lost behind the badge." He looked around the room. "Every person you meet deserves respect. Whether they look like you or not. Whether you agree with them or not. Because the moment you forget that, you stop protecting and start harming." The room was silent. Some cadets looked shaken. Others teary-eyed. Marcus closed by saying, "I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to remind you. You are the difference between chaos and peace. Choose to be better." The room erupted in applause. That weekend, Marcus visited his mother. She lived in the same small house he grew up in, quiet street, front porch swing, the smell of collard greens drifting through the air. She smiled as he walked in. "Look at my baby boy, the big hero," she teased. Marcus chuckled, kissing her on the cheek. "Mama, I'm no hero. I just didn't back down." She looked at him, eyes soft. "That's exactly what makes you one." They sat on the porch as the sun went down, the sky painted gold and purple. His mother reached over and took his hand. "You remember what I used to tell you?" she asked. Marcus smiled. "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." She nodded. "That's right. And now, look how God used your pain to change something bigger than you." Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. For the first time in a long while, his heart felt light. Later that evening, Marcus drove back home. As he parked, a young boy from the neighborhood waved at him. "Hey, Detective Reed." Marcus smiled and waved back. "What's up, champ?" The boy ran over, holding a toy police badge. "My mom said you're a real detective. I want to be one too." Marcus crouched down, smiling warmly. "Then you be the kind of officer who protects everyone, you hear me? Not just the ones who look like you." The boy nodded seriously. "Yes, sir." Marcus smiled, patting his shoulder. That's how you change the world. He stood and watched the boy run off, heart full. That night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table. The repaired photo of him and his father stood beside his coffee mug. The badge lay next to it, gleaming faintly in the lamplight. He picked it up, running his thumb over the engraved number. Then he said quietly, "This badge doesn't define me. But what I do with it, that's what matters." He placed it back down and looked out the window, eyes soft, peaceful. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. The city lights blinked in the distance. And for the first time, he didn't feel anger when he looked at them, just purpose. Because he knew his story wasn't about pain anymore. It was about power. Not the kind that comes from rank or authority, but the kind that comes from truth. Sometimes, it takes one moment of injustice to wake up an entire system. Sometimes, it takes one voice to remind the world that respect isn't a privilege, it's a right. Detective Marcus Reed didn't ask to become a symbol. He just wanted peace. But in standing up for himself, he gave others permission to stand, too. He proved that even when the world tries to break you, you can rise without hate. You can forgive without forgetting. And you can win without shouting. Because true justice doesn't always happen in courtrooms. Sometimes, it happens in hearts. If this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Share it. Because somewhere out there, another Marcus is fighting to be seen, and your voice might be what gives him hope. Hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and stay with us for more real stories that remind the world, respect isn't optional. This is Buchi Grind, and we'll see you in the next story.